his death on Calvary's cross was substitutionary. Look how God worked out his plan on Good Friday. First, God allowed the false trials. Oh, they had false trials. They couldn't put him to death without false trials. They broke the law of Moses. They sinned up to high heaven, trying to get something on him to put him to death. God's sinless one. And Paul said in one passage, wrath has come upon us, upon them to the uttermost, as they rejected their Messiah. Listen, Matthew chapter 26, verse 59 and 60. Now the chief priest and the whole council, this is the ruling council of the Jews, kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus so they might put him to death. Verse 60, they did not find any, even though many false witnesses came forth. The other passages said that they were not consistent. They were all over the place. And then it says, but later two came forward. And these two heard him say that in 3 days, if you destroy this temple, in 3 days I'll raise it up. He was talking about the temple of his body. He was talking about the resurrection. And they thought he was talking about Moses, Herod's temple. And therefore, that's what they used to try to get him more with false testimony. Matthew chapter 26, verse 63 and 68. Again, before the council, asking them questions and making all kinds of accusations. God let them sin. They wanted to sin, he let them sin. And our Lord kept quiet. Look at the verse. But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God. That's what they were trying to get him to say. They were trying to accuse him of blasphemy. And he's silent. So they were in trouble. So the high priest is upset. Look at verse 64. But having raised a direct question to him now, remember, God's got to be true to himself. He answers them. Verse 64. Jesus said to them, you have said it yourself. Are you the Son of God? You have said it yourself. Indeed, I am the Son of God. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. And he's talking about two events. The right hand of power, his exaltation at the right hand of God. And then him coming on the clouds of glory when he comes back to take control of planet Earth by force. But that's all they needed. That was enough. Verse 65. Then the high priest tore his robe and said, he has blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? Behold, you have now heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They answered, he deserves death. Then they spat in his face and beat him with their fists, and others slapped him and said, prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is the one who hit you? Man, that is worse. As if he didn't know who hit him. Note this too. God allowed Governor Power to give him over to crucifixion. This was stage one. Now they're moving over to the governor. Governor Power was in charge. He was the one that had authority to crucify. And so he is the responsible agent. And so his wife in one account says, warn him, have nothing to do with that righteous man. I had a terrible dream about him. And Power tried to wiggle out of it, but he couldn't. And he found himself indeed in trouble with God. Authority. Authority is important. Paul tells us in Romans 13 that we are to be submissive to authorities. I say that in the day when many reject authority on every level. Started in the home. They reject authority of the parents. Goes on out, they reject authority of the police. They reject authority of all those who are in authority. And God says to us who are his children, we ought to be submissive to authority. He said, if you resist authority structures, guess what? You resist me. God is the one who set up the authority structures, not man. And so as Christians, we must be careful that we are in submission to authority. We are obedient to our God. We're obedient to his will. But look at Governor Powell in Mark 15, verses 9 to 15. Powell answered them, saying, "Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews?" He had a policy that at this time he would release somebody to the Jews, and they knew that was his policy. Now he's trying to let Christ go, and so he has asked them now, "Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" For he was aware that the chief priests had handed him over because of envy. So he's messing with them a little bit. And verse 11, but the chief priest stirred up the crowd to ask him to release Barabbas for them instead. A murderer and an insurrectionist was Barabbas. And they said, "We'll take Barabbas over this Jesus." In so many words. Verse 12, answering again, Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, whom you call the King of the Jews?" Made himself out to be the King of the Jews. And they shouted back, "Crucify him!" And Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" In one passage, "I find no fault in the man." But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him!" Now remember, this was part of the Palm Sunday crowd that was saying all these messianic titles about him. "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Glory to God. Peace in heaven. Glory to God." All of this, and recognizing him as the Messiah. Well, he didn't turn Rome upside down during the week as they thought the Messiah was going to do. Therefore, they were finished with him. And here they are shouting, "Crucify him." And look at Governor Powell. Wishing to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas for them. And after having Jesus scourged, they beat him with those Roman scourges that they have. They tell you that they were full of bones and metals, and they ripped you across the back and pulled the meat out of your back down to the bones. And this, of course, with great force and spread from the Roman soldiers. So having Jesus scourged, he handed him over to be crucified. Governor Pilate failed, and will have to give an account of it in the judgment, believe me. Please note, God allowed Rome to mark and to crucify his beloved Son for us. He's banned this suffering, and suffering on the cross is all for us Gentile people, the non-Jewish people of the world, the nations. And so here Rome, the Gentiles marked in. Please note, the Gentiles marked in John 19, verse 2 and 3. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and put a purple robe on him, crown of thorns. This was his crown. They were marking him and pressed it down into his flesh and on his head. And of course, you would understand that blood flowed everywhere. And then put a purple robe on him, the sign of royalty, the sign of kingship, going to mark him. Verse 3, and they begin to come up to him and say, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and to give him slaps in his face. See, Romans hated Jews too. Jews hated them with a passion, but Rome hated them right back. And then the Gentiles nailed him to the cross. The Jews gave him over to power. And then the Roman soldiers, the Gentiles, nailed him to the cross. And Jesus said to Pilate, "He who has the greatest sin is he who delivered me to you. You have no authority over me unless it was given from God." And so the greatest sin was Israel's. But the Gentiles have followed through and nailed him to the cross. They crucified him. Matthew 27, verse 31. After they had mocked him, they took the sacred robe, the scarlet robe, off him and put his own garments back on him and led him away to crucify him. Verse 33. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they gave him wine to drink. mixed with gall. It was trying to be compassionate. It was for the pain, obviously. And but notice, and after tasting it to see what it was, he was unwilling to drink. He's going to bear the full penalty, the full price for our redemption. All the pain he would bear. Verse 35. And when they had crucified him, they just laid him down and nailed the nails in his hands and put his feet together and nailed his feet and then lifted up that cross and dropped it down in the hole. Then they divided up his garments among themselves by casting lots, also fulfilling the scriptures which said that they would do that. Then note this too, the people, the common people, and the Jewish leaders marked him. They weren't going to leave all this to the Gentiles. And so they took part of it. Matthew 27, verse 39 through 43. And those passing by, they were hurling abuse at him, wagging their heads. Can you see them? And saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." Verse 41, in the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and the elders, were mocking him and saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down."